So for more on all this, let's bring in Alexi McCammond, host of the In Sync podcast, and Eugene Daniels, co-author of the Politico Playbook and MSNBC senior political analyst. Welcome to you both. Eugene, you first here because you have new reporting that after pulling out of an interview with the website The Shade Room, a Trump advisor told producers Trump was, quote, exhausted and refusing some interviews, but that could change. Does this prompt more questions about his physical fitness, his stamina, and how might that weaken Trump's support for voters who like, you know, what they call his tough guy style?
Yeah, it definitely it begs the question from us about how he's feeling, and then for voters as well, right? One of the reasons that Donald Trump was doing so well against Joe Biden when President Biden was still in the race was he felt like he had this vitality, right? Though they are essentially the same age, right? They're like 3 or 4 years close in age. You had him running around, him talking tough, and as opposed to Joe Biden shuffling around, and sometimes, you know, folks felt like he was hard to hear when he would do speeches. But now you see him backing out of those interviews you talked about, this reporting that I had in Politico Playbook on Friday about the Shade Room interview. And, you know, interviews come up and come down all the time. There was never a set date, but the fact that, you know, the Trump advisor told the Shade Room that he was exhausted did, you know, perk some ears, including mine. And when you tie that to the rally he had this week, or what was supposed to be a town hall, and for 39 minutes he listened to music and kind of bounced around, and some of his speeches, even some Republicans will tell us that they feel like they're becoming less coherent when he's in front of public. It does make voters and strategists, most importantly, ask the question, kind of what's going on there, right? In whether or not he's fit for office or his mental acuity, voters are thinking that he has less of that as time has gone on, and he is older, 4 years older than he used to be. I also think it's important that he looks angrier than he ever has, right? And so it looks a little different to voters as he is going around and with darker language than he ever has before.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that last point, but also just say to our viewers, you're right in the numbers. Donald Trump is 78, Joe Biden is 81. But to that end, if Donald Trump is elected, he will be the oldest president ever inaugurated in the history of this country. So keep that in mind. But again, the angry part, Alexi, because Trump, you know, he does seem kind of angry at the interviews, particularly those that Harris is doing, accusing 60 Minutes of election interference, saying that it should lose its license over how it edited its interview with the vice president. Oh, despite the fact that Trump was also supposed to be interviewed by 60 Minutes and backed out. Does he gain anything calling more attention to this?
You know, Alex, the anger should be alarming to voters, just as his mental acuity and apparent cognitive decline should be apparent and concerning to voters. When I launched my podcast last month, the first episode tackled this very question, which has become the central question of the 2024 election. Is Donald Trump okay? Is he mentally fit to be president of the United States? The anger, I would argue, is not just an extension of cognitive fatigue, but I would imagine this man has untreated PTSD after 2 apparent assassination attempts. And it is no secret that that would be a traumatic event for anyone. But the symptoms and side effects of untreated PTSD include, but are not limited to, fatigue, not sleeping well, and being angry and having outbursts in your interpersonal relationships. I think we are seeing textbook examples of those things from Donald Trump on the trail.
And interestingly, Eugene, Democrats are trying to highlight Trump's mental and physical decline. They're also trying to emphasize that J.D. Vance could be the one really in charge. Take a look at this ad.
He's not just weird or dangerous. He could be a heartbeat away from the Oval Office.
Can he govern from prison?
People should be concerned.
Anonymous.
The former president, he's been off his game.
Anonymous.
He is so disoriented.
I mean, look, this was a point that Republicans, especially Nikki Haley, you'll recall, tried to make about President Biden. Haley argued that something could happen to Biden due to his age, and therefore electing him would really mean Harris would be president. Does this message work for Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, that's that exact same ad we've seen with the other side of the aisle just months ago. It's a reminder of how wild this election has been. I mean, I think it probably works with independents and some of these moderate Republicans, especially white women in the suburbs who are trying to figure out what they're going to do this time around, right? These voters, especially thin slice of voters that both sides feel like they have a pretty good chance at getting. You know, for Democrats, they're already ready to vote for Harris, right? She's popular within the party. They're energized. But what Harris is trying to do and what this ad is trying to get at is remind people of how they felt during the 4 years of Donald Trump in office, right? You talk about voters who would tell you, even Republican, even Trump supporters, who say that, yeah, it felt chaotic at times. I had more money in my pocket, but it did feel chaotic. I was always waiting for the next tweet with him calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man or whatever, right? And so that's what they're trying to remind people of. And now they're able to use his age against him. Vice President Harris, who turns 60 tomorrow, is much younger than he is, right? And now she's able to run as kind of the physical manifestation in Democrats' eyes as change, right? Younger, she's black and brown, she's a woman. There's all these different things that compared to the two old white men that were running a little bit ago together, that she's completely different. That is what this ad is getting at. And also J.D. Vance, right? He has proven to be at times a weight on Donald Trump as he's been out there. He's had uncomfortable interviews, uncomfortable interactions with supporters. And so that's what they're trying to pull at, right? These folks are weird. Do you actually want them to be in the White House? And for Democrats also saying Donald Trump is dangerous.
Yeah. Alexi Harris was pressed so hard during her interview with Fox News that the New York Times' Michael Grinbaum wrote, Kamala Harris arrived for a Fox interview. She got a debate. Did she benefit from an adversarial debate without actually having to face Trump again? And did she win?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think just accepting the Fox News interview alone and sitting down with Bret Baier is a feat for the Harris campaign, especially when Donald Trump will not do the same with your network, Alex. As we know, he's canceled a number of interviews with you guys, which is confusing. He's refused to debate her. She gave herself a chance to break through to the voters who are hearing the most and the worst about her. The conservative caricature that has been painted of her, she was able to burst that idea and to really show voters, okay, maybe you think I'm a radical leftist because of what you heard, but this is who I am. And I also think, though it was combative, she showed that she is willing to go toe-to-toe with adversaries. She is able to take on tough questions, and she is not afraid. And, you know, to Eugene's great reporting, she's not tired. She can do these things. She does say yes to these debates and these interview opportunities because she is not exhausted in the same way. So having a vigorous campaigner in Kamala Harris is something that voters are seeing when she does these interviews too.